Right, perfect. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining me here today. Some of you may already know me. My name is Omer Usmani, and I am a security analyst at the California Community College's Technology Center. So today I'm going to provide you with a general overview on the current trends in ransomware with some specific focus on the education sector. There will be a video in this presentation and 2 Kahoot quizzes, so hopefully they work. Okay, so to begin with, I'm going to go over a general definition of ransomware. So ransomware is basically a category of malware that encrypts data on a computer system until a ransom is paid to an attacker or a group of attackers, which are called threat actors. So usually a specific amount of payment will be requested by the attacker or the threat actor to decrypt the files and assets of the targeted organization. So this is generally paid out in cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, since it's hard to trace transactions involving them. It's easy for the threat actor to hide it. So in theory, after payment has been made, the decryption keys are provided by the group who committed the ransomware attack to the victim to decrypt their files. Now, in reality, all paying the ransom does is guarantee the attacker receives the victim's organization's money. So in many cases, the victim does not receive the decryption keys after having paid the ransom to the threat actors, and they basically are duped. So the most well-known example of this occurred in 2016 at the Kansas Heart Hospital, where the threat actor refused to provide the decryption keys despite the hospital having made the payment. So if you are affected by a ransomware attack, it is recommended to contact and work with your cybersecurity insurance provider before making another decision. So we also have an incident response guide at the CCC Security Center website that will be linked here in the final slides. So you can also check that out. So now we will get into how ransomware works and how it's propagated through a corporate network. So ransomware is often spread through phishing emails that contain malicious attachments. Usually a threat actor will either target a mass scale of users in a phishing campaign, or they will perform a spear phishing campaign where they target higher position employees who have administrator level credentials across their systems. So another way a threat actor can install ransomware on an organization's assets is through drive-by downloading. This occurs where the user unknowingly visits an infected website where malware is downloaded and installed onto the user system without their knowledge. So once malware is on the target system, background processes and Windows registry are edited. The threat actor continues to gain a foothold in the organization's network, usually scanning the network, looking to exploit vulnerable software. And this enables a threat actor to take control of a few machines or the entire network. All right, so since ransomware is a type of malware, we're going to go over the different types of malware. So malware can hit different types of operating systems on a network, including Windows, Linux, Unix-based devices, Android, iOS, and macOS. So Windows is the main target for threat actors since it is the most commonly used business operating system. There are different classes of malware, and within each class, there are several subtypes. So I'm going to briefly discuss each of these. So the first one is viruses. This is the most classic and the oldest, and the term is used to describe any malicious computer software. The main intent of a computer virus is to bring damage to the victim operating system's files, making the system unstable and thus forcing the user to format it and return it to its original state. The next one is worms. So this is another type of old school malware that is still widely used to propagate malicious code across networks. So originally, the aim of worms was not to destroy or compromise the operating system like computer viruses. Instead, a worm works to spread from one machine to another through internal networks or the internet without user intervention. So modern worms can also carry other malware, such as ransomware, to damage a host computer or organization. So worms usually attack email clients on the victim machine. So for example, Microsoft Outlook. and copy themselves to all the contacts in the address book to further distribute their infection to new locations. So worms can also propagate by exploiting vulnerabilities in networking protocols. Worms can make computers run slowly because they can consume your disk space and internet bandwidth. Worm propagations can cause huge loss in revenue for companies when they're spread inside a company's intranet and it's gone undetected. All right, so next we have exploit kit, and this is basically a software program that takes advantage of vulnerabilities in many operating systems, especially the outdated ones, and other software such as outdated web browsers, for example, Internet Explorer, and then forces them to behave unexpectedly. Cryptojacking is basically a piece of code that's usually written in JavaScript or Python that infects computers silently when the victim clicks a malicious link in an email or visits a compromised website infected with this malware. So after executing the malware, the malicious code begins working on the background to mine cryptocurrency and then transfers the generated funds to the criminals behind it. All right, next we have scareware. So basically, scareware is also known as deception software or fraudware, and it basically uses social engineering tactics to cause shock, anxiety, or the perception of a threat to a user in order to convince them to buy unwanted software. Adware delivers advertisements to the victim machine without their permission. So many software creators use adware to generate revenue from their freely distributed computer programs and mobile apps. Adware bundled with free programs and apps is considered legal as long as it declares this function in the software description or licensing agreement. So the problem arises when adware itself comes bundled with another malicious program, or it's linking to a malicious program that gets installed into a user system. So next we have spyware, and this is basically a tracking software, but it's solely used for malicious intent. So spyware can monitor anything you type on your keyboard and send it to its operator. Some types can install other malware as well, including ransomware, and then basically use the target machine to perform more malicious actions and essentially spy on you. Next, we have Trojan horses. So this is another kind of malicious software that installs silently onto the victim machine. So a Trojan usually comes bundled with a normal file or internet program to trick users into downloading and installing it. So there's some social engineering involved. Trojan enables the operator to have full control over the infected computing device, including the camera, microphone, anything you type in your keyboard, and basically any firmware. So a Trojan can also install additional malware or connect the infected computer to a botnet network, which can later be used to conduct a DDoS attack. So for backdoors, so basically this is malicious code that opens a port on the victim machine, and this enables a hacker, whether they're a human or a bot, to gain unauthorized access to perform malicious actions. Downloaders, so basically this is a code that contains a URL to download other malware from another server. Rootkits, so this is a much more invasive and dangerous type of malware. So it has the ability to gain full access over a system and has the ability to prevent normal detection programs from noticing its presence. So rootkits can attack at the hardware level as well. So these are called firmware rootkits, and removal of these may require hardware replacement or some specialized intervention. And next we have keyloggers. So what these do is record system external activities, and this is used to record anything, not just keyboard strokes, but also voice recordings, screen captures, microphones, or cameras. Hack tools, these are basically simple programs that are used to retrieve passwords from browsers and other installed applications, and they could be incorporated into other malware as well and try to leverage your credentials elsewhere. So when I was researching this, I stumbled across an interesting statistic. So according to Sonic Wall 2023 Cyber Threat Report, so there has been a rise in cryptojacking attempts through last year. All right, so now we're going to discuss components of malware. So in general, malware is composed of the following parts. So the first one is the payload. So this is the actual component of the malware that causes damage to the victim machine. Obfuscators and packers. So basically the payload alone cannot do the intended damage, especially when there is a robust and up-to-date antivirus solution on the target machine. So basically, obfuscators and packers help malware authors evade the antivirus scanners and intrusion detection systems by actively changing the malware code to hide the malicious intent. So basically, it can detect what type of antivirus or IDS solution is in place, and it will execute according to that. So some of the software unpacks itself in memory while executing using runtime packers. This technique was created to compress code and then decompress it in memory upon executing. However, it's used for malicious purposes. So persistence. So basically, malware needs to be executed through reboots to continue to work in case the victim decides to restart the computer or turn it off. So since Windows OS dominates the market share, the following examples were malware can hide in Windows to achieve persistence. So this includes startup folders, auto start locations on Windows registry, Windows services, scheduled task, temporary folders, and shortcut hijacking. So basically what that is changing the target attribute of the shortcut icons. So you're forcing it to download malware from malicious websites upon the launch of that shortcut, instead of going to the intended destination. So the next component of malware is the stealth component. So it can achieve stealthiness using different tactics, such as process hiding, injecting malware through code in a legitimate process as a thread, hiding modules and DLL files, using fileless malware, such as built-in Windows tools, so PowerShell and Windows management instrumentation to execute the malicious code. So detecting fileless malware is extremely difficult, and using traditional scanning techniques such as signature-based methods or sandboxing usually don't work against this. Another tactic is changing the file extensions. So this is an old trick, but it's still used. Another one is armoring. So basically, it's a set of techniques used by the malware to prevent antivirus and malware analyzers from capturing and analyzing it. So for example, the malware tries to detect if it's running under a virtual machine environment or a debugger, or if the malware analysis tools are being executed, such as, let's say, TCP dump exe or Wireshark. So the armoring technique is crucial to increase the lifespan of the malware and then protect its communications with the servers that control it. All right, so finally we have command and control. So as the name implies, the command and control is like a center or a server that's responsible for sending instructions and other data for the malware to reside on compromised machine. So it's also responsible for receiving stolen data extracted from the victim machine, such as passwords and financial information. Some malware uses cloud-based services such as webmail and file hosting services as a C2 supplier to appear as normal traffic and can evade detections by firewalls and other security solutions. So basically, this is like the server that the threat actor is controlling in order to remotely control the victim's machine. So signs that we could look for that tell us a system has been infected are called indicators of compromise, or IOCs for short. Obvious signs are that the web browser desktop is locked with a message about how to pay to unlock your system and or your file directories. So basically, this is a ransom note file, and it's usually a TXT file. All of your files have a new file name extension appended to the file names, and they commonly look like some examples I'll show later. So these are some of the general IOCs. So the first one is an unexpected file encryption. So this is the most obvious sign of a ransomware attack. Files, especially like common ones like Word docs, Excels, PowerPoints, JPEGs, they suddenly become inaccessible. And encrypting files may be renamed with strange extension names as well. Next, we have ransom messages. So ransomware attacks usually involve some kind of message informing the victim that the files have been encrypted and the ransom is required to recover them. So this could appear as a text file in the directories where encryption has occurred or as a pop-up message on the desktop. So another sign is increased CPU and disk activity. So the encryption process of the malware can take up significant system resources. So this could lead to slower computer performance. Basically, Task Manager or other system monitoring tools will show unusually high CPU or disk usage during this process. All right, next we have changes in file systems. So some types of ransomware can create new files or directories, delete backups, and also alter file permissions, give themselves administrative access. Next, we have unusual network traffic. So ransomware often communicates with a command and control server as described previously. So this can result in unusual outbound network traffic, especially to known malicious IP addresses that belong to official block lists, like let's say CISA. So disabled security solutions. So a lot of ransomware variants can disable antivirus or other security solutions, such as Windows Defender, to avoid detection and their removal. So inability to access shared network resources. So if network locations have been encrypted by the ransomware, the users may lose access to the shared network drives, databases, or cloud storage locations of the organization. Unusual software or processes running. So basically, some ransomware may require the execution of certain software processes on the victim's machine that are commonly unknown. And finally, there's a failed access to files or programs. So again, a sudden inability to open certain files or programs because they're encrypted. So these are examples of some common file extensions that any ransomware variant can use to rename files. So you can see they look unusual. So they're not like the normal, like .jpeg, .docx, or .xlx. So they do have like strange names. So we do have a video that goes through the workflow of ransomware. So this one is from the Hive strain. So this is not one we will be discussing today, but it was a good example. So the author of this video does use two tools to analyze and the malware later on. So they're called VirusTotal and Intezer and I have linked them in the notes section of this slide. So once you distribute it, you should be able to find them. So there is no speech in this video. So if there is no sound, that shouldn't be an issue. So let's play and hopefully this begins. Okay, so we don't need to see the Linux part. So the Windows part was sufficient. So the important thing to note was how the malware here disabled all of the antivirus services, including Windows Defender here. Right, so the implications of the ransomware attack. So usually this means some sort of financial loss and also loss of reputation among stakeholders, customers, and members if their PII is compromised. Right, so some of the threat actors we will discuss later utilize what's referred to as ransomware as a service. So abbreviated RAAS or RAS. So ransomware as a service refers to a business model used by cyber criminals where ransomware is developed and sold or leased to other criminals who can carry out attacks. So this model allows people who may not have technical expertise to develop their own ransomware to launch attacks. So it works much like software as a service model. So here's an overview of how the process typically works. So first is development. So the originator of the ransomware as a service creates a ransomware strain. They are typically experienced cyber criminals with a deep understanding of software development and network security vulnerabilities. So next up is distribution. So the ransomware as a service provider then either sells or leases this ransomware to other criminals. And through various illicit channels, they are able to achieve this. So these could be underground forums, darknet markets, or even public-facing websites. So the software is usually provided with a user-friendly interface, and it allows the operator to customize parameters such as ransom amounts or the payment instructions. Next is execution. So the operators distribute the ransomware typically through methods such as phishing emails, exploit kits, or other forms of social engineering. So the ransomware infects victims' systems, encrypts their files, and demands a ransom to restore access. So next up is profit sharing. So if profits from ransom payments are paid and successful, they typically are shared between the ransomware as a service provider and the operator. So the split can vary, but it's common for ransomware as a service provider to take about 20 or 30% of the ransom and leaving the rest to the operator. So finally, there's support. So some ransomware as a service providers offer customer support to their operators and customers, providing guidance on how to launch attacks and manage the victims. So this can make the ransomware as a service appealing even to less tech-savvy criminals. So by leveraging the ransomware as a service model, cyber criminals can carry out high volumes of attacks, casting a wide net to maximize the chances of finding a victim willing to pay the ransom. So the model allows for quick and easy spread of ransomware threats, making significant contributions to the rise of ransomware attacks worldwide. So I do want to leave the quiz for the end and not right now. Right, so next we're going to discuss quickly statistics. So education institutions hold a wealth of sensitive data, including personal information about students, staff, and parents, as well as intellectual property. This makes them attractive targets for cyber criminals who either directly exploit this data or hold it ransom to extort money. So ransomware offenses targeted at educational institutions lead to lost time for students and staff, as well as financial losses. So they've resulted in postponed tests, shut down schools, wiped out data, breached rules and regulations surrounding data privacy, and created a process that costs a lot of money to restore systems. So the education sector has experienced a significant rise in malware attacks with, So according to Malwarebytes, there has been an increase of 157% over the past year. So there are two separate trends to this. So Higher education customers saw a more moderate increase of attacks. So this is only 26% compared to 2022, whereas K-12 institutions faced a massive surge, which was 323% increase. So these are the common ransomware groups attacking education institutions. So number one is Vice Society. Number two are just a bunch of random group of actors that can't be really grouped together. So second one we will discuss today will be Lockbit, and then we have Alph V, which is more commonly known as Black Hat. It's easy to refer to them as that. Right, so we will start with Vice Society. So over the past year, the ransomware group known as Vice Society has led more attacks on education institutions across the world, especially here in the US and in the UK, than any other cybercrime organization. So in September 2022, the LAUSD, so the second largest in the United States, with a student population of about 600K, fell victim to a cyber attack by Vice Society. So, so when LAUSD declined to meet the ransom demands, Vice Society retaliated by releasing an alleged 500 gigabytes of data onto the dark web. So the leak information was compromised of classified and confidential data, including information belonging to contractors. From April 2022 to March 2023, Vice Society's attacks have significantly targeted the education sector, accounting for about 39% of known attacks. So this percentage is remarkably high compared to the average of 4% for all other ransomware groups that were monitored by Malwarebytes during the same period. So upon successful compromise of a network, Vice Society stipulates a ransom for the removal of the leaked data and the provision of a decryption tool. So it has been documented that these ransom demands have soared above the $1 million mark. So as a comparison, the median ransomware payments for all ransomware groups in Q4 of last year was 410,000. So Vice Society sets itself apart from some of the other ransomware groups because it's not a ransomware as a service provider. So it doesn't generate its own ransomware, nor enlist other cybercrime groups to perform the attacks. What they basically do instead is already available ransomware families in their attack chain, and these ransomware families are sold on dark web. So two of the common ones they use is the Hello Kitty malware and the Zeppelin family of malware. So since the group it might be infiltrating the network for several days before initiating a ransomware locker, merely stopping them using a ransomware locker is not adequate. So the group will have already gone through the data, made efforts to obscure the organization's activities, and they basically would have gained enough network access to mount another attack by the time a ransomware locker is executed. So should members of Vice Society exfiltrate a network, it is imperative to detect them promptly, dislodge them, eliminate any tools, accounts, or backdoors that they may have established. So they do, like most ransomware groups, employ a strategy of blending in with other processes. So they use legitimate utilities like PowerShell and Windows management instrumentation to hide their actions. So the task of spotting such behavior is challenging for any institution, and having a SIM and EDR solution in place to monitor network traffic is really necessary. So these are some of the IOCs of Vice Society. So this is the ransom note. These is the email addresses in the ransom note, to an address that tells you where the decryption key is. And then these are the IP addresses that this ransomware will try to connect back to. So this one is from the Hello Kitty malware that it uses. So it will encrypt files, and some of them will have the extension renamed to .crypted with a D. All right, next we have Black Cat. So there are two prominent examples of Black Cat attacks we will go over. So the first one occurred in Q2 of last year, where the North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University fell victim to an attack from them. So the attack interrupted a range of the school services, including wireless connectivity, Blackboard instruction, single sign-on websites, VPN usage, software called Jabber, Qualtrics, Banner, and Chrome River. So another attack in Q2 2022 was conducted against Florida International University. So in this one, Black Cat claimed to have stolen 1.2 terabytes worth of data, including encompassing accounting records, contracting information, email databases, and social security numbers. So the Black Hat ransomware, it's also called Alpha V, so ALPHV, exemplifies the growing ransomware as a service model we discussed earlier. So it's distinct from other ransomware groups because it uses a relatively new programming language called Rust, which is a really efficient and high performance. So using Rust, it's able to attack multiple devices through various potential access points. So the entry and execution methods of Black Hat may differ depending on the actors who purchase the ransomware, but the end result is basically the same as with any other ransomware attack. The target data is encrypted, removed, and then leveraged in extortion scheme. So in this approach, the attackers basically coerce the victims into paying the ransom by threatening to disclose the stolen data publicly. So by using a modern language like Rust for the payload, this ransomware attempts to evade detection, especially by conventional security solutions that might still be catching up in their ability to analyze and parse binaries written in Rust. So Black Cat can also target multiple devices and operating systems. So Microsoft's security research team has observed that successful attacks against Windows and Linux devices and VMware instances were done using Black Cat. So Black Cat can terminate processes and Windows services that protect against encryption. So this includes, but isn't actually limited to, shadow copies, commercial backup software, Microsoft Exchange, database servers, Microsoft Office applications, Recycle Bin, and Windows Restart API. So since Black Hat is a ransomware as a service, other threat actors can, or cyber criminal groups, can buy the software that deploys the ransomware. And basically what it is just a command line program. And it basically gives different options to control the malware. So these are some of the IOCs of Black Hat, some PowerShell scripts, and then hashes for those scripts. All right, next up is a Lockbit. So I think this is the last group we will discuss. So one example of attacking an education institution was the Oklahoma City University in July 2022. They experienced a cyber attack, which was later claimed by this group, Lockbit, and most systems and servers were temporarily down. So information that was stolen pertained to current and past students, employees, and others whose data was stored on the university systems. So the compromised data may have included names, addresses, social security numbers, driver's license or state ID numbers, and passport numbers. So Lockbit was first discovered in 2019, and it is another new family of ransomware that quickly exploits commonly available protocols and tools such as server message block and PowerShell. So it was originally known as ABCD due to the file name extension of the encrypted files. before it started using the current .lockbit extension. So since the early beginnings, it has evolved into one of the more nefarious strains of malwares to date. And they do ask for an average ransom of around $40,000 per organization. So there have been 3 versions of Lockbit discovered so far, and the latest one was Lockbit 3.0 in the June of last year. So these are some of the files Lockbit generates when it's being utilized by a threat actor. So once Lockbit is active on a system, it will stop various Windows services from, and it will do this concurrently by using multi-threading. So basically that allows a program to efficiently perform multiple actions at the same time. So after it generates these files, the first thing it does is lock or stop Windows Defender. So it performs an enumeration of internal Windows services, and it first finds Windows Defender. And after Windows Defender is disabled, the Windows Security Center service required to launch Defender is deleted by the ransomware. So it basically makes it impossible to restart Windows Defender. So next thing Lockbit attacks is the recycle bin. So the files in the recycle bin are not encrypted when this ransomware is deployed. What it does is it replaces each file with randomly generated bytes, basically corrupting them, and then they are deleted. And because of this, all the files in the recycle bin are no longer recoverable, even if the decryption keys are found or provided. All right, next, what it does is monitor and terminate any running SQL processes. And the reason it does this is to make sure no SQL queries can be run on the system to analyze this ransomware. Next, it deletes shadow copies. So shadow copy is basically a snapshot of a volume that duplicates all the data that's held on that storage volume. And so by deleting these, Lockbit is attempting to make sure the victim would not be able to recover backed up data. So it also makes a call to an internal Windows system object and modifies it to allow the ransomware to access the Windows management interface. So from there, it executes a query, a WMI query, and then it deletes each of the returned shadow copies. So next thing it does is network enumeration. So another thread of the Lockbit malware attempts to log onto the infected system with the username and passwords it's able to discover while it's enumerating through a network. So if any login is successful, the credentials are evaluated for membership in a domain admin group, and if so, they're copied. Then another thread looks for and enumerates available domain controllers, getting each of their names, and attempts a remote login with a successful username and password. And this is used to further spread Lockbit across the network. So other threads during the network enumeration phase check for connected drives and network resources while giving special attention to those where operating systems are installed. So in all cases, there are newly discovered network paths, and those are passed to a function in the program that spawns additional encryption threads and basically encrypts most, or if not all, devices on the network. So Lockbit does use Cobalt Strike as a C2 tool. So I don't have much more detail on that, but that is a command control tool that's commonly used for pen testing. But many threat actors also use it for ransomware. So this is the ransom note. It says your data is stolen, encrypted, and makes a threat to the user. And it basically gives them links to try to pay the decryption payment, which you shouldn't do. So these are some of the indicators of compromise, and these are pulled from CISA. So I will have links to these in the finalized slides. All right, so I think this is our last slide. So these are general prevention recommendations from the FBI. So first one is require all accounts with password logins. So this can include service accounts, admin accounts, domain admin accounts to have strong, unique passwords. Next one is avoid password reuse. So passwords should not be reused across multiple accounts or stored on a system where the adversary may have access. And next up is require multi-factor authentication. So you want to provide this for all services to the extent possible, particularly for email, VPN access, and RDP access, and accounts that have access to critical systems. It's patch known vulnerabilities. So this basically means you want to keep all OSs and softwares up to date that don't have any CVEs associated with them. Next, we have remove unnecessary access to administrative shares. So basically the admin share and the C share. So if the admin share and the C share are deemed necessary for operations, you want to restrict privileges to only the necessary service or user accounts, and you want to perform continuous monitoring on those accounts for anomalous activity. Setting up a host-based firewall rule. So basically you only want to allow connections to admin shares via SMB for a limited set of admin machines. Enable protected files. So basically enabling protected files in the Windows OS prevents unauthorized changes to critical files. Cementing networks. Basically, this will help prevent ransomware from spreading to the entire organization. Identify, detect, investigate abnormal activity. So basically, you want to have a SIM, IDR, and EDR, or sorry, IDS and EDR solution in place. Make sure you're monitoring all network activity and find things that are suspicious that could be connected to a ransomware strain. So also our recommendation is to implement a vulnerability and scanning management program and a SIM solution. So we do offer Tenable Security Center and Splunk for the SIM. If your school doesn't have it already, you should most certainly use that. All right, so we can do the quiz now. That was the last slide. Hopefully it works. So can you see the screen with the pin?
Yes, we can see it.
All right, perfect. So basically, you just entered this pin at this URL. Right, so I'm just going to give 2 more minutes for people to join. All right, so I'm going to start. Oh, it looks like there's more people joining. All right, I'll give 30 more seconds. All right, we're going to start.